in the current market where profitability matters. And I know it's funny to say this, but it's true that it was not always the case, particularly for fast-growing enterprise. Today, I would say that it is absolutely critical. Why? Because you can scale a company and you can scale GMV and grow revenue, through multiple manners. However, to make that process profitable and well executed, supply chain is an absolute imperative. There's no other way around. You cannot grow and scale a business efficiently, an e-commerce business efficiently, if you don't have a well-tied supply chain.
Welcome to the Ecommerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives, a podcast by Noibu, where we explore the elite strategies and cutting-edge insights with our expert guests. Get ready to propel your e-commerce business to the next level.
Welcome to the Ecommerce Toolbox Experts Perspective. Joining us today, we have an executive from a very large company you might have heard of called DHL. Welcome, Nabil Malouli.
Hey, Kailin. Great to see you.
Awesome. Well, first off, we always like to start off by learning a bit more about our guests. You've had an extremely impressive career so far. You've done business internationally. Now you're based out of the US. Do you maybe want to kick us off by talking a bit about your career journey so far and how you ended up in your position today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to international business school in France where I grew up. And, early on, I would say, in my studies, I knew that I wanted to work internationally. And so I just didn't know where and how and which area. But what I did was starting to study and live overseas. So I lived in a couple of places as I was studying, but also then I started to work, out overseas. And what I discovered at that time was there were a lot more opportunities in emerging markets. And I started to focus my career really around emerging markets and emerging economies. And so I went to China, I went to Mexico, I worked in the Latin American markets and in the Asia Pacific market at the beginning of my career. And it really allowed me to get opportunities that I think I would not have had necessarily, in more mature markets and specifically maybe in Europe. And that was quite interesting. I ended up in supply chain. I actually studied in investment banking, and it's a pretty strange move, but I did study in investment banking. I didn't really like it that much, and I always liked commerce and international commerce, and I started to really work around quality control, international buyer, supplier management. So I started to work more on the trading side, and then I entered into the supply chain part of the business. And I really liked it because it was working with different people across different regions. It's an exciting space. It's always changing. There is movements. There is opportunities. There is always something new. So it never gets, boring, and it's always different. And then I never found I would stay that long in supply chain, to be honest. I think the first 7 years of my career, I thought at some point I'd probably do a move towards something else. But ultimately I got opportunities after opportunities, different opportunities in different places, as we spoke, starting in Asia, then I went to Latin America, then in the US. Today I have global responsibilities. And how I ended up in e-commerce and focusing on e-commerce, 8 years ago, I started to work on a project in the US for the largest sports company in the world. And I realized at the time how difficult it was for even very, very successful companies to actually build e-commerce networks when it comes to the execution, last mile delivery, fulfillment operations, return management, and so on. And I thought there was, an amazing opportunity because all the companies will have to go through that process. And, 8 years ago, it was way less mature than now. Today it's an obvious thing. But at that time, obviously e-commerce had started already. Many companies were on the journey, but they were very early into the journey of this transition. And I thought, well, if this company has this problem, that's a big problem for many of the companies out there in the market. And so I just decided to focus on that. And I really like the fact that you were also building solutions that it really impact the world, right? At my scale of work, if we are able to deploy new solutions, improve delivery time, give more convenience to consumers, I literally have friends and people I know that benefit out of this, right? Like business partners, it's really a large scale operation that is not only in the US, it's global. So, it's pretty cool to develop solutions that then, a friend might buy a product from a company and you're like, well, that product come actually from a site that, we've developed, to a solution we've developed. So that's pretty also exciting in terms of building new products and new solutions. So that's a bit of the story.
I love it. I think one thing that's fascinated, and I two things I'm pulling out of that. The first thing is I think you're absolutely correct. I've interviewed a ton of people that mentioned that they took overseas roles. So it's like, hey, I went to Singapore to launch e-com for this brand, or I went overseas to do this thing. And I think you're right. I think when there's markets that are growing quickly, being able to elevate your career through those markets is something that's going to, if that business is growing 100% a year, you're going to grow quicker than if it's growing 10% a year. Just to pull on the thread of being in China, you said Brazil, the US, you obviously grew up in France. I'm always curious to learn a bit about how do you think living in all those different regions and being able to work with all those different personalities and customs, how do you think that builds into how you approach leadership and problem solving today?
Yeah, I think, so I think first of all, in leaderships, attributes, I would say that the biggest influence has been really to be adaptive and really think about the different personalities, different cultures, different people, even, the same person at different stage of life, in a way you lead the people, I think is critically important. So to adapt and understand the differences between the different people you work with or that you're trying to influence, I think is key. But the second big thing, and I think it's more important today than ever, is, when you live and work with people across the globe, every week, every month, you really realize that there's a huge missed opportunity by many people trying to box certain culture or certain way of working and certain, attributes that a country or, region or language, whatever that might have, while you could do the entire opposite, which is, well, let me take the best out of each culture across the globe and let me deploy that best in class what they are the best at and apply it in a valuable manner in the way I work and the way I lead and the way I run the business. I'm going to give you a very simple example. I lived in China for 4 years. China has, if you read the media in the US, I mean, it's tremendous, right? I mean, in the negative sense, while, there is a huge amount, I have a huge amount of respect for what China has done. But if you think about it like a business perspective wise, this is a way of working, which is a very long-term way of working. People think long-term, they build infrastructure in the long-term, they build competencies in the long-term. You could criticize whatever you want, but there are certain attributes that are very positive. And when you try to build a long-term business, you can really benefit out of looking at the way people think and then apply that in your benefit. Another example is, I grew up in France. I'm originally from Morocco, my family, but in France, there's, sometimes even too much, but there is a very good practice around critical thinking. People challenge status quo constantly, right? Sometimes even too much. Well, you could say, this is a lot of complaints and so on, but you could also take that critical thinking and challenge status quo in constructive manner, which can really help you to drive the business. And the same, right? In the US where I live, here, the way the people work, very result driven. There's also a lot of, value into working around that. So my biggest thing is try to be more open, listen to the different, way of working and the way people are doing things. And instead of trying to box them in a negative manner or in a different manner, just take the best that can work for you and adapt it and put it into your application on the day-to-day.
I've never heard it framed like that. I really like that. It's to your point, there's customs in every different country and there's something to be learned everywhere, but taking the best of each and applying it to the way you work, I think that's genius. I really, really like that. Is there something, Nabil, that really sticks out, whether it's a pivotal moment or an experience in your career journey so far that's really influenced how you look at bringing innovation and growth to the teams that you lead?
Yeah, I think the biggest pivotal moment was really this switch towards e-commerce. I think oftentimes we see opportunities in an area, right? And like now, I think many people see an opportunity, for example, around the application of AI, but very few people actually do something concrete about it, right? In terms of, well, how do I embed this and how do I take advantage of this, in terms of, driving change, pushing new solution, innovating and so on. And I think to me, when I really, realized that project I was referring to, the scale of the opportunity, the scale of the challenge, and the scale of what it could mean for me in terms of like being able to develop new solution in a well-established company, I think it was really, really appealing. And I think, I'll encourage people also to think about, some of these things, we see them, we hear them, but we don't take actions toward them immediately. And I think that sometimes, just because we are too busy, or we have a lot of other competing priorities, but I think it's really important to try to look at when there is something really that is meaningful.
Cool. And just switching gears, I know that you're obviously an expert in supply chain and last mile delivery. You've had a lot of experience, and so have we, with scaling businesses that are in the mid-market, hoping to be kind of enterprise businesses one day. How important do you think supply chain, last mile delivery, and kind of all of that is to a scaling mid-market business?
Yeah, I think today, especially in the current market, where profitability matters, and I know it's funny to say this, but it's true that it was not always the case, particularly for fast-growing enterprise. Today, I would say that it is absolutely, absolutely critical. Why? Because, you can scale a company, and you can scale GMV and grow revenue, through multiple manners. However, to make that process profitable and well executed, supply chain is an absolute imperative. There's no other way around. You cannot grow and scale a business efficiently, an e-commerce business efficiently, if you don't have a well-tied supply chain. And if you think like, well, that's not really true because you could have a drop shipping business or you could have other businesses that have very low touch on supply chain, I'll say yes, absolutely. However, keep in perspective that your barrier for entry then are extremely low, and you're just one very strong Chinese competitor to come in between your business model and your consumers, and you could be gone in a month, right? So that's true and that's why for me, that's not a sustainable manner. I think sustainable businesses, if you look at the like of Amazon and so on, why do they maintain competitive edge? Even companies like Walmart and so on, why they maintain competitive edge is because supply chain is a very important part of their business. And even if you look at fast, growing enterprise, more on the mid-market, when companies usually reach like 200, 300 million of GMV, they start to really put like a logistic team. When they start to reach 500 million of GMV, then they really start to invest money, serious amount of money and time around their supply chain. Why? Because then at that point, they are spending somewhere between, it's more or less 20, 25% of logistics spend in e-commerce. And so you're starting to spend like across the business of 500 million, you're starting to cross above the 100 million range in spend. And so then you can justify investing. But I think this is something that is not talked a lot, particularly around the early stage mid-market. But when you start to really scale, it's an absolute imperative.
That's a really interesting perspective. And to really pull apart one of the things you said there, I think you're bang on with Walmart, Costco, Amazon. If you're selling other people's products, a large part of your enterprise value is in your supply chain, because that's the only way of preserving margins. When you're looking at the mid-market, let's take a hypothetical situation. Let's say you're a mid-market or early enterprise business that actually manufactures their own products. I think it's clear if you don't manufacture your own products and you're not investing in logistics, you're probably not profitable anyways, or you have very, very razor margins. Looking at people that are manufacturing their own products, do you think that's something that they often are maybe a bit too arrogant or laissez-faire about, where they just actually don't invest in logistics because they feel like their product is a good enough competitive edge? And do you think they're leaving some not only margin, but some kind of protective moats on the table there?
Yeah, I think anybody that has a business that think that they can just leave logistics on the side and that they will be able to build their business out of brand loyalty or a uniquely positioned product and so on, I think it's a very short-sighted thinking. And the reason is that today, they are even like the largest, most successful companies, the one that have a huge retention and very loyal customer base, they get targeted by new direct-to-consumer brand, every day. And some of them are catching on, right? You look at, now it's a well-established company, but you look at the Lululemon story a couple of years ago, or you look at companies like Alo and and so on, you see some of these companies that are growing into areas of business that were really well established. Now, do these companies manufacture? No, they don't manufacture themselves through their own factory. They buy from other players. I don't think that the manufacturing as such is the ultimate IP. I think what is really IP is certainly the product quality and the brand. And you don't necessarily need to manufacture yourself. I mean, the best example of this is Apple, right? I mean, Apple doesn't manufacture themselves. At scale, right? I mean, that would be a good example. But I think the supply chain consideration around how do you actually do this, where you build experiences that are also very solid in the supply chain experience, like last mile delivery, on-time performance, a two-way communication. This is also very important today because consumers might love your brand, but if the products come 10 days later and damaged, I mean, it can be hard for them to come back, especially if you're selling premium products.
Yeah, I think actually there's the first episode we did with the CEO of Solo Stove and Solo Brands talked a bit about when he joined the business. Their strong point was they had a really strong gross margin, but the first thing that he went in and fixed was that all their negative reviews were related to damaged or late shipped products. So it was the first thing that they actually fixed. They had a very competitive, good product, but they were actually being blocked from getting to the next scale because 1 every 10 would be damaged or wouldn't show up. And it was causing kind of bad reputational risk online. To your point, I think a lot of companies during COVID that were maybe focusing on GMV growth and didn't care about returns and didn't care about logistics. Now that the kind of endless money and the potential, they didn't really care if they're losing money on a net per transaction basis, are now being pushed towards profitability. And you're actually seeing a lot of these public D2C brands, they're actually seeing top line revenue decrease because of a lot of the things that they're having to unwind. So question for you is, how do you think all this really intersects with the big push for profitability in D2C now? Like, is this just kind of something that is just table stakes, or how would you look at that if you're leading one of these brands today?
Yeah, I mean, I think for anybody that is aiming at, building a really large enterprise, it's an absolute must. I think if you're looking for a quick exit, you could maybe get around, and build, a unique product, maybe that a large CPG or a large a fashion company might be interested into. But it's going to be very, very, it's going to be much more difficult, right? For sure. I think the move to profitability, I think, is not temporary. I think it's just a reality that, to be honest, is also normal, right? I mean, there was a move towards certain things that were accepted that, forgot the statistics, but it was something like 60% of the companies that were going IPO were losing money actually, before the shift. And it's like, well, how many, everybody, take the example of Amazon, and how long it took them to move to profitability. But not everybody is Amazon and not everybody is Jeff Bezos, right? So I think, there are certain companies that it's really a challenge after to really make that pivot. And I think investors, I also know a lot of investors, and I speak to a lot of investors of large brands. They are definitely changing the way they are working too.
Makes sense. And I think returns could have a significant impact on profitability. I know I've heard stories, friends, people I know, they used to order a bunch of stuff online, return half of it. They don't really care. It seems like during COVID and during the big boom, it got pretty relaxed. You can kind of do whatever you want on the return side. And now that there's a big spotlight on profitability, what strategies have you seen implemented to really streamline the process, the returns process, to ensure it's not a pain, but at the same time, it's not too easy and destroying the bottom line? Have you seen any kind of strategies deployed specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. So returns is one of the areas that has the biggest potential when you think about really, like, everybody today is trying to do primarily three things: make more money, be more sustainable, and improve consumer experience, right? And returns actually touch these three areas. Through like a good return experience, you improve retention. You also can transform a bad a product into a better experience through discounts, through exchanges, and so on. So I think the recommendation to most of the people looking at this is today, I think you have to split returns into two aspects. One is the digital experience of what are you giving in terms of interface to the consumer. And two is what do you do operationally with these returns coming back. So on the first step, you have today software companies like Return Go, as an example, which are softwares that will allow you to improve that exchange, retain revenue, and give to the consumer real-time options that you can plug it into your web shop and that you can have this type of solutions right off the bat for the consumer that improve the retention. Then if the customer ultimately decide to send back the returns, then you have to really manage that returns, the tracking, the products coming back, checking the items. And so there's different ways there. How do you manage this into inventory, management? Where do you do the grading? And so I think you really have to think about it in these two distinct aspects and experience. And returns, I will encourage also anybody that that has a business, an e-commerce business. It's an area where you can increase margin, in performance, and also be more sustainable company. So it's a big area of opportunity. In the US alone, last year, 760 billion of product returns.
That's crazy. To your point, it not only has an economic footprint, it hits the bottom line. I think it's a lose-lose, candidly. The customer doesn't get what they want. So no, that's really good. And as I like to wrap up here, Nabil, any parting wise words for anyone that's trying to grow their career in e-com right now? We have a lot of kind of younger people that are younger execs or looking to get to executive roles. Any kind of parting words of wisdom?
I think that the big word of wisdom, and it's really what I try to do is, interacting with people from other businesses and going on site and going to operations, going to stores, being on the battlefield, like I like to say, and also connecting with people from other industries. I think it's really, really valuable. I think many people don't do it enough, and they really focus on their business and the way they do things. And I think the other thing I would say is, especially in the US, there's an opportunity to think beyond the US. We cross border now. So a lot of people, if you look at the media coverage today, a lot of the coverage is around the Chinese companies selling into the US, right? So instead of debating that topic as a brand, you could also think about how do I export my products, across multiple countries and regions across the globe? Because we lose sight of that. But people buy cross-border for two reasons, primarily availability of product or price. And so you might not have the cheaper price, but you certainly have availability of products which are unique in the US, which you don't have in many, many economies across the globe, which with e-commerce, you can do that in an easy manner.
I love it. Great episode. Wanted to thank you so much for your time. I think this is a very valuable episode for our listeners. And thank you so much, Nabil. I'm sure we'll chat again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kailin.
The Ecommerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives is brought to you by Noibu. To find out more about Noibu and how we can help you debug your e-commerce site and rocket your revenue, visit www.noibu.com. That's Noibu.com. And then make sure to search for the Ecommerce Toolbox Expert Perspectives on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found, and click subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Noibu, thanks for listening.